Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean.
Yeah, so once with Sir Corbett, he was like, okay.
No, Kenny was waiting tonight.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Mylène Simard, and I'm an event facilitator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory and that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene people, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In addition, McNally Robinson Bookseller itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Oosterland. We're gathered here today to celebrate the launch of Don't Fence Me In, True Stories from Rural Manitoba by Bill Redekop. The event will begin with a reading from Bill, followed by a conversation between Bill and host Morley Walker. Then there will be an opportunity to ask questions. If you are one of those here in person, please put your hand up and I will come over to you with a microphone to ensure your questions can be heard over the live stream. And if you're watching at home from YouTube, write questions in the chat and I will pass it along to the author. I will be back at the close of the event to go over the signing procedures, but just mention to you that we will be asking you to remain seated while we bring Bill over to the signing table. Give him a few moments to settle in there. To begin, I'd like to introduce your host, Morley Walker. He's a retired Winnipeg newspaperman. Among his positions, he edited the Winnipeg Free Press book review section for almost 20 years. In Don't Fence Me In, his sixth book, Bill Redekop returns to his Winnipeg Free Press roots to mine the highways and byways of rural Manitoba for stories. Bill spent 14 years traveling the back roads of Manitoba for the Free Press. His previous book, Lake Agassiz, The Rise and Demise of the World's Greatest Lake, was the McNally Robinson top-selling Manitoba book in 2017, and the third top-selling Manitoba book in 2018. Here to tell us more, please join me in welcoming Bill Redekop.
Hi, everybody. Thanks very much for coming out. This is a great crowd. I think, I invited most of you. I've made some notes, but I don't even know if I need them. But I guess to start off, I want to thank my family. They're filling up the first couple rows here. They've come out to so many of these. This is, I don't know, I guess the fifth or so book launch, and they've given me tremendous support, and I feel very fortunate. I want to thank my wife Mary and my son Ethan, who helped on this book. They helped with the copy editing of Don't Fence Me In, and when I was at the Free Press, I guess, well, someone told me this anyway, that I had a reputation of being hard on copy editors, and well, I had to tread lightly with these two. So I could end up in the garage, sleeping in the garage. But it was also kind of fun, unique, working with family on an enterprise like this. Kind of like a family business in a way, and I know, well, I should mention Bob Tallman sitting at the back. He knows all about running family businesses. He's with Princess Auto, and but sort of doing this with family, it's kind of it's a very special thing, and it's something to go through, and it's something I treasure about this book. Let's see. I don't know. I guess, you know, I had a very unique position at the Free Press. And I don't know that anything like that will come back the way media is going. I got to travel around the province, and that was really, and I loved that. I loved every minute of that. But I also had such a great response from readers that most newspaper people don't get to enjoy, I guess, just because I guess, you know, my stories weren't necessarily the they weren't hard news for one thing. And well, people said they were positive, but it wasn't really that I was trying to be positive. I was trying to find things that were interesting. And so I got I got a great response. I got letters like crazy. Like, I couldn't believe all the mail I got, and not just at the beginning, but all the way right to the end. I thought at the first, well, it's just a novelty and this will die down, but I kept getting letters all the way through. And I didn't really say much in the newsroom because I didn't want to sound like I was gloating. But anyway, I really appreciated all the people who wrote to me. Let's see. I think I'm just going to go into a reading. I'm going to shut up and go into a reading. I'm going to read just a short excerpt, and this book is it's 24 stories. They're nonfiction short stories, kind of the type that I wrote for the Free Press, but longer and sort of I take more liberties, I think. And for me, it seemed like when I was doing this, it was like a tribute. It was like doing a tribute album. It was like a double album, you know, me saying sort of my thank you or appreciation to the people of rural Manitoba. It was a double album, 6 songs, 6 stories aside, and that's kind of was in my head as I was writing it. So one of the stories is about detention guards. And detention guards are a position in rural Manitoba, or rural Canada, actually. They have they're actually jail guards, and there's 70 or so RCMP detachments in Manitoba, and they all have a cell or 2 or 3 at the back of the detachment, and they need people to stand guard when they arrest somebody, because it's too expensive to have an officer there, and they're short-staffed, and they need them out in the field. So they have these detention guards, and when I heard about that, I just thought, wow, there's a lot of sort of comic potential there. Mostly it's seniors that get called around midnight on a Friday, Saturday night, come down, change into your pajama or change out of your pajamas. And so anyway, that's I'm going to just read a brief excerpt on the start of that story. It's called Jailhouse Rock. As Heather Erickson recalls the story, she picked a bad day to wear a skirt. Erickson, who lives east of Winnipeg, was performing civilian guard duty, a position many seniors in rural Canada fill for RCMP detachments. Every detachment has jail cells. Typically, there will be a corridor at the back of the detachment with cells running off both sides. A detachment will have 3 cells the size of shoe boxes, each with a toilet, a drinking fountain above the toilet, and a cot and a gray blanket. When prisoners are arrested, almost always late at night, they can't be left alone in a detachment cell for safety reasons, but it's too expensive to have officers sit on guard duty all night when they're needed outside to keep the peace. It would also be a poor deployment of resources for the chronically understaffed RCMP to just sit outside guarding or sit inside guarding prisoners. So RCMP RCMP detachments keep a list of local people who have signed up to work as jail guards. The jail guards are usually local seniors. Seniors are a convenient asset pool because they have mostly retired from their regular jobs and aren't out partying all night on weekends when most arrests are made. The oldest detention guard I knew of when I researched this story was Ernie Abbas near Hodgson's in Manitoba's Interlake, who was still going at age 94. The seniors typically get a call between midnight and 2 a.m. We've got a prisoner, a Mountie on the other end will say, can you come down and do guard duty? They say yes, change out of their pajamas, make a thermos of coffee, take some reading material and puzzles or whatever they use to stay awake, and head down to the detachment. They spell off the Mounties who either head out again to complete their shift or go home to bed. Usually the civilian guards work overnight and are alone in an empty station except for a prisoner or two. On this particular shift, when Erickson had decided to wear a skirt, there were still 2 female officers at the station with her. It was at the Beausejour detachment east of Winnipeg. The Beausejour detachment didn't have a TV monitor to keep an eye on prisoners back then, so Erickson had to jump up and do a manual check through the cell window. Quote, the idiot was drunker than a skunk, she recalled. I go in to look, and he's sitting on the bunk like a Buddha, and his face is really red. And then I noticed something around his neck, and he had his hands by his neck. So I thought it looked like he was trying to commit suicide. The man had tied 2 socks together and was pulling them across his neck. Erickson hurried to one of the officers and recommended she look at the prisoner. The officer said she was busy and brushed her off, but Erickson said and went into more detail. Holy Christ, the RCMP officer said. The 2 female officers charged into the cell. It was a big guy, and one officer tried to flatten him out and the other tried to hold his legs down, Erickson said, but the man was large and wasn't cooperating. Erickson could see the officers had their hands full. You're not supposed to intervene as a civilian guard, she said, but I thought, what the hell? If they fire me, they fire me. And I need the guy in the middle. She couldn't say precisely where in the middle she put her knee, but it did the trick. So it had taken 3 women, 1 in a skirt, to wrestle a man fighting like a mountain lion, but he finally released the ligature. The 2 officers didn't say anything to Erickson about her intervention. To Erickson, the prisoner's suicide attempt was pure folly. How can someone do harm by pulling tube socks around their neck? Physics would dictate that you can't kill yourself that way, she said Erickson, who has a unique Katharine Hepburn-like voice to go with her engaging personality. Loss of air would cause a person to lose strength before becoming asphyxiated. At worst, the person would pass out. Then the officers made the prisoners strip naked. Erickson didn't stick around to find out how they managed that. So he wouldn't try anything else, and they took away his gray blanket. Quote, so I guarded this nude man all night, she said. That's it. So I guess we'll proceed to the interview section.
Let's do it, Bill. Yeah. Okay, I've got to ask you right off the bat, Bill. Last I heard you were retired. Oh, how's this? No, how's that? There we go. Okay. So retirement didn't agree with you? Sleep until noon and doom scrolling through Twitter until supper time? That's your fix, huh?
Well, I guess, what happened was when I left the Free Press, I still had stories that I wanted to write. And so that was a big impetus. But the other part was that I think, and I know a lot of alumni are here tonight, and I think when you leave the Free Press, you've worked in a beat for maybe 10 years, and you have all this information in your head, and you just think, well, there's got to be something I can do with that. And and maybe not, but I just thought, yeah, I could probably try to write a book.
Well, you've done that. This book is a lot of work. You've traveled a lot of distance, but a lot of kilometers on your car. You talk to people in all four corners of the province, from detention guards, police dog trainers, radio show hosts, teachers, priests, cowboys, grave diggers, oilmen. Was that range part of your plan all along, or did there just happen by?
I wasn't thinking about where, I wasn't thinking about the mix really. It's just, those were the stories I had, and then I accumulated more after I left the Free Press. So about half or 2/3 of them were from my Free Press days, and the rest I learned of after. But I was just sort of thinking out this time I would, because as we get older, we kind of want to do what we want to do. And so I didn't want to I wasn't too conscious of the mix. I was just conscious of what I wanted the stories I wanted to do, the stories that interested me.
Well, as you said, the stories are much longer than the ones you were able to get into the Free Press for the most part, more ambitious, and they cover a time span. I was particularly struck by the one about the two city boys from Toronto in the 70s who decided to go on a canoe trip, and they end up living out their lives 50 years later in the Hollow Water First Nation on the east shores of Lake Winnipeg.
Right.
Tell us a bit about that one.
Yeah, that was a story I wanted to do for a long time. So back around the 70s, I guess these 6 hippies from Toronto, they were all working at, or most of them working at an auto parts warehouse, kind of like an Amazon today. And then they were sick of the status quo. And so they dreamed up this canoe trip on the Saskatchewan River, which in Manitoba runs through the Paw and through Grand Rapids into Lake Winnipeg. But they started at Rocky Mountain House. They started at Rocky Mountain House in Alberta, and they got and they didn't have Gore-Tex or stuff like that back then. They had like cutoff jeans and bandanas. They didn't have hats. One guy had never canoed before, so and 10 weeks later, they washed up in Hollow Water First Nation, and 2 of them never left. They caught a part-time job, or they caught little jobs here and there for paid room and board. They met and fell in love with Indigenous women, and they stayed and they adopted an Indigenous lifestyle. And the story is about how that went for them.
Yeah, quite an amazing story. Another one that I was struck by, I guess a bit more prosaic, but still very touching, about the two women in Morden who had a friendship that lasted for decades, a very loyal and trusting friendship.
Yeah.
How did you get that story?
Well, Cheryl and Ruth are here tonight from Morden. The thing about them that I learned was that they had been going for lunch every week for, I guess, 30 years when I met you. It's probably 35 years now. I met them at a signing. I was doing a book signing for the IBC book in Morden. And Cheryl was sort of the host, I guess, and Ruth came along to get to have a book signed. And I guess the thing that I noticed was just how they connected. The 2 of them connected, and so I got to talking to them, and I found out about this unique about their friendship and their commitment to each other. But it also I love stories about friendship. And there are a lot of them, really. There's like a movie like Stand By Me, My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, that's probably the greatest one.
Thelma and Louise.
That would that would suit them. Yeah. But and there's not a lot of study, but you know, there is a Beverly Fair professor at the University of Winnipeg specializes in friendship study, and she's like one of the leading authorities on it. So that worked in very nicely, and so this was allowed me to examine their friendship and look at the subject of friendship as a whole, what we know about it. I mean, when they do, you know, sociological studies and psychological studies, they focus on the parents, but you know, what about friends? Well, friends are just harder to monitor. Like, you know, it's harder to gauge, but friends are very important, as we all know.
So, you know, tell me, obviously this stuff is very important to you, this whole area. What do you miss most about covering that rural beat for the Free Press?
Right, yeah. Well, I miss driving around. That was lots of fun. You know, this surprised me when I started to do this book. I thought I would miss the writing, but one thing I found was I really missed interviewing people. And not that I'm a great interviewer, but it was just a lot of fun, you know. And I'll give you one example. Although this was a very easy one, was Greg Barrows, who was selling life insurance in Melita in the oil patch, and saw all these oil trucks going by and thought, well, why couldn't I start a company? And he ended up doing that. And now he's like the second biggest company in Manitoba, oil company in Manitoba after Tundra. So when I arrived in Melita to interview him, I didn't even have to ask a question. He just went for 2 hours straight, and he was just it was like he was waiting for me for the last dozen years. And he was great, and it was just great. And I looked at my list of questions, and they just one after the other, they just kind of disappeared, and I didn't have to do anything. But yeah, and so, you know, we love it when someone's that prepared.
Yes, of course.
But other times, you know, you know, there was the ghostwriter for Prince Harry's book Spare, and you had an article in the New Yorker a while ago, and he was saying, you know, never use a tape recorder when you're interviewing because people freeze up and all that. And I find that I have no problem with that, with using a tape recorder. And Mary will attest to this because I interrupt people so much that they forget about that tape recorder really fast.
Although it's always painful to have to listen to them afterwards to hear how bad you sound.
Yeah, that's true. Well, let me ask you, what do you miss? I'm throwing you a curveball. What do you miss most about Free Press?
You know, I miss the people. I miss the people I worked with, who I still try to keep in touch with.
Yeah.
But, you know, I always enjoy going into the office. This whole trend that we have today with the hybrid working, people working, you know, since COVID, people working from home. I understand the attraction of that, but I do not think I would have liked it. I don't think I would have ever had an idea.
Right.
For a story.
Yeah. And I know we're different because you like going into the office. And for me, if I found rural stories, that means I didn't have to go into the office. And that was a big carrot.
So, you know, how did you must have developed a kind of philosophy of what you were doing. What were you bringing to the paper? How did you define your role?
How did I define my role?
As a rural,
I guess I saw myself as a bridge between the rural and urban world. And I think that the urban audience, they don't know what goes on out there. And so I was representing in many ways the rural people and presenting them.
I see.
Yeah. And in addition to that, I think, you know, I had license to go down all these gravel roads that you drive by and never get a chance to explore. And I got to look around and do that sort of thing too.
So, to bring it back to collection, could you talk about maybe what was the story that you did in this book that was, let's say, the hardest or the one that didn't go the way you wanted it to go?
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I had a story. There's a story in there called Our Lady of Seven Sorrows, and it's a Roman Catholic church, and it's really in the hinterland. It's in the middle of, well, in the bush, basically. And it's a beautiful stone church, steeple. It's just so grand. It's a fantastic. You see the site and you wonder, what is that church doing there? And so I wanted to do that story. I decided I was going to do that story. And I got partway into researching it and interviewing people. And then I found out that there was a residential school on the grounds and also run by a Catholic church. So I thought, okay. And some people said, oh, don't go there, don't go there. But then I thought, well, if I'm going to chicken out that easily, well, who wants to read a writer that's going to chicken out on something like that? So I kept at it, and then it came up that I went on again for a while, and then it came up that the band, the Pine Creek First Nation, had hired a company to do a radar ground penetrating study for unmarked graves. And not just around the residential school, they actually went just around the church. Okay, I had to revise the story again. And I probably wrote about 25 versions of this story, but there's more yet. So then the day I was handing in my manuscript to have it formatted in the layout, it was announced that the band was excavating under the church for unmarked graves.
The day up.
So I threw that up again. Okay, now I have to rewrite it again. So what do? I decided I'll rewrite it, and I'll just say, this is going on the day that I'm writing this. This is what I've learned. These are my impressions. I don't know what they're going to find, and go through it. And I felt, well, this is going to be a failure. Like, this story is going to fail, but that's okay. Like, it's okay, because we should talk about it. We can talk about it. I find that people are going into their corners kind of thing. One corner is saying it's like a concentration camp, and another corner is saying residential schools weren't that bad. So I thought, okay, I'm going through. And so that was a default story.
The story that I think I like the best, I found the most fascinating, surprised me, because it doesn't necessarily appeal to my particular, but I would have thought my interests were. But the story from southern Manitoba near Pansy about the wolf hunters, and where you get into a lot of natural science about the behavior of wolves. And as a matter of fact, one of the wolf hunters, Dick Schroeder,
Right,
is pictured on the cover of the book. I wonder if you could tell us a bit about him.
Well, excuse me. Well, I love wolves, first of all, and I know that Manitoba conservation officers, when they want to know what's going on in the forest with wildlife, they go to trappers. And Dick Schroeder is, he's a trapper. He traps wolves, but that's because he runs a community pasture in southeastern Manitoba. And a community pasture is a place where people take their cows to graze for about 6 months of the year. And he's a cow, he rides a horse, he's a modern day cowboy. And and I was told, if you want to learn about wolves, go see Dick Schroeder. And he was great. He said one of the things I remember him saying was that, the forest where you are, that's like the wolves' living room. And if a picture is so much as crooked, they'll know that, they'll see that. And he described like changing boots one time, and that scared away the wolves for a week because they could smell something different in the area. The other thing I think that's really fascinating about the wolf chapter is the new research that, we call them a pack of wolves. And what they, and really, where that came from was they captured wolves, they put them together, and then they fought and established who is the alpha male, and they got this sort of, got like a really bad rep. And now what they've determined is these alpha male and alpha female, they're the parents. They're just the that pack is just a family of wolves. And what a change of perception you have once you think of it that.
Yeah, that doesn't sound quite as scary. However, I'm still keeping my distance. Virtually, you reported this book almost entirely during COVID.
Right.
How did that impact things?
Yeah, well, I had to stop. It was a stop, start. And with every lockdown, of course, like all these stories are where you would go to their farm or rural residence or town or whatever and meet them and sit down and spend time. So no one was gonna let a stranger in during a lockdown. So yeah, that was, and then I went in between when there's lockdowns, I got into other things. And like one of them, and I just mentioned Princess Auto. One was to write a book with Bob Tallman on Princess Auto, which give a plug. It's coming out next spring. So it was stuff like that. I did the book on Rick Frost is here. Hi, Rick. And we did a book on Commodore Ritchie, which is here in McNally's too. So.
So it didn't, as it turned out, you kept yourself busy. You didn't have.
I did. Yeah.
Very impressive. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up the topic of the fact that you've self-published this book as opposed to going the route of conventional publishers.
Right.
Why did you make that decision? At first I think we might even want to explain to people here what the difference is between conventionally publishing a book and self-publishing.
Right. Well, self-publishing is where, I guess I end up doing everything. I'm in charge of everything, from writing, from conceiving the book, to writing it, to design, working with a designer, sales, distribution, picking the printer, like all those things. And the reason, I'm not even sure why I did that. I never tried to get it published. It just, it kind of gave me a charge. It kind of was like a challenge to me. And like one of the really, I had really gratifying moments along that whole kind of journey. And one was when I had to contact Barb Huck of Heartland Books, who published my 2 previous books, and tell her, that I didn't offer that, that what I was going to do. And I wasn't sure how she would take that, or she would take it as criticism or of them. And I tried to explain that wasn't the case. And Barb understood totally. And that was so gratifying to me. And I think Barb understood because when I was working with them, she would always try to challenge me. She would always kind of push you to go further, kind of thing. And so she would understand that in this instance, I wanted to try something different and challenge.
I was impressed actually. You've got lots of color pictures in here. Now, even major market American books where they have their illustration sections often limit themselves to black and white photos. Is your retirement finished now? Because you've got all.
I don't know. Maybe I got roped in. I'm not sure. It seemed like I guess today that it wasn't that much more. I wasn't planning on going all color, but it just kind of turned out that way.
All authors have kind of love-hate relationships with their publishers. Bitching about publishers is a time-honored tradition. Did you learn something in this process that made you appreciate your publishers before?
Yeah. Well, just starting with experience, having to go through making mistakes and things like that. And they organized a lot of things. When I did my Agassiz book, I had launch in Brandon and Neepawa And I started to try to do that with this book, but I just didn't know that I could pack a haul like this.
I see,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, I didn't go that route. So, yeah, I missed out on that.
Well, before we open this this evening to questions from the rest of you, just one more question.
Okay.
Are you planning a sequel? 124 stories, or
Yeah.
maybe?
I don't know about that. I've got the, like I said, Princess Auto book coming out, and then we'll see after that. I don't have anything planned.
Okay.
No plans. No plans for a change.
Is how do we do this with the question and answer? Do people come up?
They'll raise their hand, I'll come to them.
Okay,
Yeah.
oh, well, there's no, right in behind there. Okay, so does anyone have any questions of Bill? There's a gentleman in the hat. Oh,
I've got to make a little statement too. Most of you here probably have known Bill for quite a while. I just met him last summer when he called me. I'm the president of the Grandview Museum, Grandview, Manitoba, 4 hours from here. And he called about a muskox skull we have, and he wanted information. So when he came there, we talked on the phone a few times, and when he came to look at it, I had to take him first into our new lumber building, which is stuff and Rick Frost over there, responsible for that, a big part of that company. But he mentioned before about he interrupts everybody. He sure keeps you on your toes because he just starts to ask you about one thing and he's into something else. It's almost harder to deal with. I used to be able, my grandkids, I could tell them about something and they'd oh, sure, grandpa. Now they Google it to see whether I'm right. So we've got to be a lot more careful when I say it. I've done it with him. Very interesting person. Wish you success, and that was it was great meeting you, and hope to see more of you in the future. And I'm looking forward to reading this one.
Thanks a lot, Lyle. That's Lyle Moran from Grandview. Drove in for this.
2 questions. How much guidance or free rein did your editors give you at the press? And number 2, do you ever go back to visit the scenes or people that you write your stories about?
Good questions. I had pretty much, I did have free rein for a long time, and then I didn't have it anymore. That's kind of how it worked out. As far as going back, you know, in some ways, and sometimes I keep in touch with people. I've kept in touch with people after, not usually in real active, but it comes up sometimes. Someone will contact me, or I'll contact them. Like when I'm doing these stories, I might know, oh, okay, I remember so and so lives in that area, and I'll give them a call and try to get information or whatever. But yeah.
Said you've been doing this for 14 years. What I have 2 questions. What did you do before that at the Free Press, and how did it come about that you got this visa that ended up being 14 years?
Yeah, good question. I was a general assignment reporter before, which is just anything that comes in the door kind of thing. And I kind of got to like that. I got kind of the adrenaline rush of you never know what was going to happen from day to day. What was the second question?
How did it come about that you started?
Oh yeah, I think he was the guy, our editor at the time, Nick Hurst. He saw that he wanted some kind of road coverage, and he saw it as an opportunity for writing, for someone who was a good writer, I guess. And I was approached 3 times. I refused twice. And like they sent an editor came and asked about it. Anyway, and finally Nick came up and said, "Why won't you take this job? I think you'd be perfect for it." And I said, "You don't treat it as a serious beat. That's why I won't take it." And because I knew the people who had been in that beat before, they got jerked around, for want of a better term. They got jerked around by the editors, and they never got a chance to really do their job. And so that way I kind of negotiated a pretty good position.
Thank you.
The gentleman in the back there.
Bill, how many miles do you think you covered?
Wow. I don't know, maybe 10,000 a year, maybe 140,000, yeah, I don't know. And you keep that close to track. It's just
The audio books in the car?
no, just meditating, you know, when you're driving along, solving the problems in the world.
How, I know some further background, and I'm just wondering if your Manitoba cooperator stint had any carryover to your interest in doing stuff in the country.
Yeah, sure, that really, well, it certainly gave me a agricultural background, and that was a real base for me to understand and know what's going on, and so, yeah, that was, yeah, it was great, yeah, I mean, agriculture is still, you know, king in the rural areas, and yeah, that was really valuable, yeah.
Bill, I got to say that Ruth and I really appreciated your interview style and how you drew out just the story that we've been living for 35 years, and I just want to say we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Cheryl.
Well, if that's all the questions we have, we can probably move on to the signing portion of the meeting. And so I'd just like to say congratulations, Bill.
Thank you.
Good work, and thank you very much for this opportunity as well.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you both so much. Thanks for the packed room tonight. It's really impressive to see how many people are out here standing in the back to support Bill's new launch. Okay, so we will move on to the signing portion of the evening. As I mentioned earlier, we will ask you all to remain seated for a few moments while we safely transport the talent over by the cash desk to the signing desk. And we are encouraging you to pick up one of his copies of the book to get signed, and only a gentle reminder to pay for it before you leave the store. You can imagine why we have to say that now. Thank you again to Bill Redekop. Thank you again to Morley Walker, and to you all for supporting McNally Robinson. Thanks. Have a good night.
Do I go myself or do I feel that?